In 1980, the president of Columbia Pictures saw the huge popularity of fantasy and sci-fi films and decided that the studio needed their own mix of the two genres. So he set off to greenlight the most expensive single film the studio had ever done to directly compete with that other sci-fi fantasy franchise, Star Wars. Krull's a 1983 sci-fi fantasy film from director Peter Yates. The movie opens with the monstrous Black Fortress hurtling through space until finally landing on the planet of Krull. The ruler of the Black Fortress is called the Beast. He and his army of slayers travel from world to world, enslaving all that they meet. Two warring kingdoms decide to put aside their differences and join to fight the Beast. Princess Lissa, a maiden of fair skin and giant hair, is set to marry Prince Colwyn. Lissa's father isn't too happy with her choice of husband.
Good fighters make bad husbands.
I think he's talking about Mike Tyson. Colwyn goes to see Lissa.
Your journey was hard.
Not as hard as. That evening, the wedding ceremonies begin. As this is going on, the Slayers are riding to attack the castle. Meanwhile, back at the royal wedding...
Oh, the princess is dipping her hand in the water to pull out fire, as is tradition. She gives it to the prince to symbolize their union. What a glorious day for our country, and indeed, the world.
Around this time, the Slayers attack the castle. Colwyn fights them off with their one weakness, chairs. It's a good thing the Slayers have these laser rifles because they are terrible sword fighters. How did these guys manage to conquer anything if they could be defeated by a tablecloth? When a Slayer's killed, they make this distinct noise, which is the exact sound that I make after stubbing my toe on the bedpost at 3 a.m. The Slayers killed the guards and kidnapped Lissa. The princess has kind of a deep voice. Colwyn gets shot, the princess is kidnapped, and the castle's overrun. Today didn't turn out so well. A traveler named Ynir is putting peanut butter on Colwyn's wound. Ynir gives Colwyn his father's medallion and tells him he needs to man up and act like a king. Instead, he cries like a baby. Ynir tells Colwyn about a weapon called the glaive that he needs to defeat the beast. He takes him to a mountain he has to climb to find the cave where the glaive is hidden. Colwyn climbs the mountain. He's climbing, and he's climbing, and... climbing. Did they decide to just show us this whole ascent in real time? So after several hours of climbing footage, Colwyn finds the cherry jello factory. He locates the glaive under the liquid hot magma and pulls it out. Oh my god, it's the most awesomest thing ever! In the Black Fortress, Lissa is in a giant eye while the beast is trying to sweet-talk her. Colwyn returns with the glaive.
Do not use it until you need it.
Yeah, why would you go and do something cool? Ynir explains to Colwyn how the Black Fortress teleports every day, so you never know where it's going to be, which makes getting there very difficult. He tells him they need to find the blind seer, who can tell him where the fortress will be. In the woods, a fireball passes Ynir and Colwyn.
Help! I'm drowning!
Oh, good. The comic relief. This is Ergo, a spellcaster who can shapeshift into different animals. Colwyn, Ynir, and Ergo head through a pass and into a group of...
robbers.
The group of bandits is led by a guy named Torquil. Ynir and Colwyn convince the bandits to join him on his quest to find the Black Fortress. There's about 10 men overall, and Liam Neeson? Alright everybody, the rest of you can go home. Liam's got this one. He's gonna carve a path of destruction across the planet, walk into the Black Temple, shoot the beast in the face, and give the princess a pony. The group heads off, all the while being watched by a one-eyed monster. No, not that one. This one. Ynir explains the creature was a cyclops and how they hate the beast because of a bad deal they made with it.
They gave up one of their eyes in exchange for the power to see into the future. But they were cheated. And the only future they are permitted to see is the time of their own death.
He leads them into the Lucky Charms cave where they meet the seer and his young apprentice Titch. The seer tries to locate the Black Fortress, but the beast stops him. They have to go to the Great Swamp, which is outside of the beast's range. While in the swamp, they get attacked by a bunch of slayers. You know, now might be a good time to use the glaive. The Cyclops Rel joins the group to help them fight the slayers off. While walking through the swamp, they start to sink in quicksand. Colwyn helps to get them out, but while this is going on, the seer is killed and replaced with a shapeshifter. The shapeshifter tries to kill Colwyn, but Rel saves him. If the Slayers can change into anything, why doesn't the beast send a bunch of them to impersonate the entire crew? Now with the seer dead, Ynir says they can seek help from someone called the Widow of the Web. She's the only one left who can tell them where the Black Fortress is. The group sets up camp while Ynir goes to see the Widow. Lissa's lost wandering around the Black Fortress.
Sweet dreams you can't resist. N-E-S-T-L-E-S. A dream as sweet as this. N-E-S-T-L-E-S.
Ynir enters the lair of the widow. He starts to climb across the web to get to the cocoon in the middle. He seems genuinely surprised that there would be a giant spider in here. What did he think he'd find? He calls the name of the widow, Lissa, and she uses an hourglass to stop the spider. This gives him enough time to get to the cocoon. Turns out the widow is Ynir's old girlfriend. She immediately begins to berate him.
But you would not stay with me. There were responsibilities, duty, ambition.
Lissa confesses she killed his son. Her punishment for doing so is being trapped here. Ynir forgives her, and she turns back into the younger version of her. She uses her sight to tell him where the Black Fortress will be. She then breaks the hourglass and gives him the sand, which will help him to escape the spider. And stay out! Ynir makes it back to the camp to tell him that the Black Fortress will be in the Iron Desert tomorrow. He then falls down and breaks this styrofoam rock. Apparently when the sand runs out, he dies. The Iron Desert is very far away. Rel suggests that they use some fire mares. They're the only things fast enough to get to the fortress before it moves again. I think this was a stuntman fail they decided to keep in the movie. They capture some fire mares and ride them all the way to the Iron Desert. So the fire mares can fly too? On Dasher, on Dancer! Rel stays behind because now is his time to die. They get to the Black Fortress and fight their way in. Hey Colwyn, maybe now would be a good time to use the glaive? Rel decided to go with them after all, and evidently is laser-proof. He leads them into the fortress past the guards, and then gets crushed by a door. Torquil decides to do some fancy gymnastics, but ends up just putting himself in the line of fire. Now inside, they hunt for Lissa. Wait, Liam Neeson gets killed? Bullshit. I guess his ghost is just gonna come back and kick their asses. Inside the giant Fabergé egg, the floor opens and the group is separated. Ergo turns into a tiger and kills the Slayers. Colwyn finds Lissa's prison and finally uses the glaive. He rescues Lissa and kills the Slayers. See? Why didn't you use this earlier? He's taking out the Slayers like they're nothing. If you used this earlier, many of the guys that went with you would still be alive. The glaive slays the beast but gets stuck inside. This is embarrassing. Look, I've never had this happen before. Just give me a minute. Don't look at me like that! Colwyn goes to recover the glaive, but the beast is still alive, so he escapes with Lissa. Lissa explains to Colwyn that their love can defeat the beast. Well, not exactly love. Colwyn's flamethrower hand. Bye, glaive, you were awesome. Colwyn and Lissa find the others.
That's Ergo!
How did he know it was Ergo by the blood trail? They rescue Ergo and Titch and escape the fortress. Hey, you jerks want to stop throwing rocks at us? Colwyn uses his flamethrower hand to blast their way out of the fortress. The fortress disintegrates, and Colwyn, Lissa, and the rest all head home together. The movie was mostly filmed in Pinewood London Studios in England for about $27 million. The production was one of the largest ever in the studio's history, using 10 of the 16 sound stages, including the legendary 007 stage, where all the James Bond movies were shot. Production was so busy, there were times where they were shooting in 4 sets at once. While in production, the studio wanted the movie to be a sci-fi fantasy, but with more of a focus on fantasy. The original title of the screenplay for the movie was The Dragons of Krull, even though there were no dragons in the film. Then in 1981, the movie Dragon Slayer came out. Despite being an excellent movie, it failed at the box office. They then dropped the dragon from the title and just went with Krull. This was also the part where they decided to add more sci-fi into the production. Director Peter Yates was chosen for the movie because of his varied movie history. With such classics as Bullet, Murphy's War, and The Deep under his belt, the studio was confident that he could handle the complexity of the film. Yates wanted actor Ken Marshall for the role of Colwyn because he reminded him of Errol Flynn. Actually, if you look at the way that Colwyn fights, there is a very Robin Hood quality there. Marshall had just finished a 12-month shoot on the TV miniseries Marco Polo. Weeks before filming began, Marshall began training in fencing, boxing, and horseback riding to prepare for the role. The lovely Lisette Anthony played Lissa. She was only 17 when production began. Her role was handled very unusually. She was an unknown English actress at the time. The then president of Columbia Pictures had the notion that American audiences would rather watch an unknown American actress instead of an unknown English one. So they had all of her lines dubbed over by actress Lindsay Krause. That's why this whole movie, her voice just doesn't seem right.
Colwyn, hurry back to me.
The president really thought that if the princess had a British accent that less people would go to see the movie. The Black Fortress was based on Ayers Rock in Australia. It was built like a jigsaw puzzle so they could remove the parts in the end when it was being destroyed. This scene was filmed upside down to make it look like the parts were flying upwards. The first time they shot it, it didn't come apart right, so they had to rebuild it and do it again. When the fortress was bleeding on the inside, the blood was actually wallpaper paste mixed with glitter. Stephen Grimes was the production designer. He designed all the weapons in the film, including the glaive. At one point, the glaive had a cross look to it, but they decided to alter it so they could avoid any religious backlash. They spent days doing various techniques to try to figure out how to get the blades to pop out properly. Finally, after many high-tech ways didn't work, they had a decidedly low-tech solution: rubber bands. The blades were held back by rubber bands, and there was a trigger that would release them all at the same time. They knew the glaive would be popular, and when the film wrapped, the cast and crew all received glaive tie clips. You can ask any self-respecting geek who grew up in the 80s what movie weapon, besides a lightsaber, they would want, and most likely it would be a glaive. It's such a shame the weapon was barely seen in the film. There was a part in the original screenplay where Corwin rescued Ynir from the spider, killing it by hitting it with the glaive. Unfortunately, that part was removed long before shooting. I think the major problem was that he got it too early. They should have done something along the lines of he met with the bandits who then took him to the mountain range where he got the glaive, and then they went to the Black Fortress. That way there wouldn't have been like 2 hours of the movie where he had this awesome weapon that he didn't use. The Crystal Spider was a stop-motion creation from animator Stephen Archer. He previously had worked with the legendary stop-motion master Ray Harryhausen on Clash of the Titans. When the word got out that Yates was looking for a stop-motion animator, Harryhausen gave his highest recommendation to Archer. The Crystal Spider was actually made of plastic, and they fogged up some of the parts of the body to hide the wires. The animation process was grueling, and it took 2 to 3 days just to get a single shot. This scene was an homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark. The quicksand was painted cork with a submersible bridge underneath. The quicksand was so well hidden that various members of the crew kept falling in. They kept a tally, and after the scenes were shot, they announced that 17 people had fallen into the quicksand. I thought the way that they handled the beast was very cool. With the foggy close-up shots, you never really got a good look at him, which made him all the more menacing. The creature stood 8 feet tall with its facial movements controlled by remote. The fire mares were Clydesdale horses. They created mechanical horse legs, with gas lines inside them that shot fire out. The regular horses had smoke canisters attached to their legs to give the illusion of them being on fire. For the riding shots, they were filmed in front of a green screen while running on giant treadmills. Famous composer James Horner's score really helps to elevate the film artistically. He's composed scores for everything from The Wrath of Khan to Aliens to Titanic. The studio wanted to get the film out way before Return of the Jedi, but due to some of the special effects taking too long, it ended up opening 3 days after Return of the Jedi. Even though there was a massive marketing push for Krull with toys, board games, and a barrage of ads, it still was overshadowed by the Star Wars Titan. It's also a shame that many people consider Krull to be nothing more than a Star Wars knockoff. Sure, the film was greenlit to capitalize on the popularity of that style of film, but aside from a few minor things, the two films really aren't that alike. In fact, that if you insist Krull rips off Star Wars, then you might want to look into a little movie called The Hidden Fortress, which Lucas admits is where he got his inspiration for Star Wars. I think the biggest problem with Krull and why it didn't go over commercially is because it was too ambitious. With its unusual themes, odd locations, and even odder characters, it just didn't seem to gel for some people. I also thought that while the Beast was a wicked villain, his troops were terrible. They just kind of lumbered along and could be killed very easily. If the Black Fortress would have landed on a planet that had already developed automatic weapons, it would have been obliterated in about 10 minutes. Still, the film has some great concepts. I love the idea of the fortress warping to a different place every day. I also thought that having Rel's people all know the moment of their death was very interesting. A lot of people didn't understand his death. Allow me to explain. See, initially he knows he's gonna die, so he stays behind.
No, he must stay here and accept his fate. If he opposes it, he'll bring great pain on himself.
However, if you don't accept it, then your new death will be painful. Rel knows the group needs him, so he goes to help them, even though this changes his fate, and he knows he's now going to be crushed to death in the walls of the fortress. For comic relief, Ergo was actually the right kind. Funny, not annoying.
I am Ergo the Magnificent. Short in stature, tall in power, narrow of purpose, and wide of vision.
That is very impressive.
I should hope so.
I'm Titch.
That's not impressive, but adequate.
It's a crime this movie isn't held in higher regard. It's one of the most creative and unique films of the time. There's been talk of remaking it, but why? The original film is fine. Why not do the sequel that they set up at the end of the film? Colwyn and Lys's child would grow up to control the galaxy. Why not do something like having the Beast leave a part of himself inside Alyssa, and after their child is born, he does indeed grow up to rule the galaxy, only as the new Beast. They then could work something in, like Colwyn and Lyssa have a second child, who then has to amass an army to track down the planet his brother's living on and kill him. Nah, don't do that.